Are emblematic of the massive failure of the DOJ to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. To my right,
power protects itself. At least, that's what many people believe. And when conversations turn toward the Epstein files, that belief only gets stronger. At the center of this exchange are Thomas Massie and Pam Bondi, two figures representing very different roles in the system, one asking questions, the other expected to have answers. But what unfolds is less about clear answers and more about controlled responses. Massie approaches the topic with a directness that's hard to ignore. No build-up, no soft framing, just a focus on the Epstein files and what they actually reveal. The underlying concern is simple but explosive. If so many documents exist, why does the public still feel like it knows so little? That question alone carries weight, because the Epstein case isn't just a legal matter anymore. It's a symbol of power, secrecy, and the suspicion that some truths never fully come out. Bondi's responses, however, stay within a familiar pattern. Careful wording, limited acknowledgement, no sweeping claims. From an institutional perspective, that makes sense. Legal authorities cannot confirm what isn't backed by verified courtroom-level evidence. Every statement has consequences, political, legal, and reputational. But from a public perspective, that same caution often feels like deflection. And this is where the tension begins. Massie isn't just asking about documents, he's indirectly questioning transparency. He's voicing what many people outside the room are already thinking. If the investigation was so extensive, where are the names? Where are the clear connections? And why does it feel incomplete? Bondi doesn't take the bait. Instead of expanding, she narrows. Instead of speculating, she sticks to what can be officially stated. And in doing so, she avoids making any claim that could trigger a larger wave of consequences. Now, there are two ways to interpret this. The first is procedural integrity. Bondi is doing exactly what her role requires, sticking to verified facts, avoiding assumptions, and refusing to validate claims that cannot be legally proven. In a system built on evidence, that restraint is not weakness. It's discipline. But the second interpretation is far more critical. To skeptics, this isn't discipline. It's distance. A way to acknowledge the issue without truly opening it up. A way to respond without revealing. Because when answers stay within safe boundaries, they often leave the real questions untouched. And that's exactly what happens here. Massie pushes for clarity. Bondi maintains control. Neither side breaks character. But the gap between them, that's where the real story lives. Because this isn't just about one exchange. It reflects a much larger pattern, one where public curiosity keeps expanding, but official explanations remain tightly contained. And over time, that gap creates something powerful. Doubt. Not necessarily proof of wrongdoing, but a persistent feeling that the full picture is still out of reach. Looking forward, the Epstein files are unlikely to fade away quietly. There will be continued pressure for more disclosures, more names, more clarity. Whether that pressure leads to meaningful transparency or just more carefully worded statements remains uncertain. Because when a case involves influence at the highest levels, the rules often change. Information moves slower, answers become narrower, and truth becomes harder to define. So who's right in this exchange? Massie, for pushing the questions that many are afraid to ask, or Bondi, for staying within the limits of what can actually be proven? The answer isn't simple, but one thing is clear. When questions keep growing, and answers stay the same, people start looking beyond what's being said. And sometimes that's where the real story begins.
Behind me, I have 3 documents from the DOJ production that are emblematic of the massive failure of the DOJ to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. To my right is an email that was sent by the victim's lawyers to the DOJ. It was a list of names not to redact, a list of names not to release. What did the DOJ do with this email? They released this email in the document production. Literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors, you did. And they're getting phone calls. A lot of these people didn't want to be known. And we know you touched the document because you redacted one name and you redacted the lawyer's name, but you left the survivor's name there. The next document I want to show you, that was in the title, the victims' survivors' names, all right? The title of this one is Child Sex Trafficking, Co-Conspirators, fully redacted. And by the way, I'm going to unredact them here. Les Wexner is in this. Now, your your deputy attorney general said, oh, well, he appears hundreds of times in the files, but he doesn't appear in this file until I forced you to release it, where he's listed as a co-conspirator, not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking, not to prostitution, not to money laundering, child sex trafficking. And then finally, what we have here is the third exhibit that I have is emblematic of the FD 302 release. These are the documents that we need, that you're holding on to and over-redacting because they have the names of the men who are implicated. How do we know? Because the survivors gave testimony to the FBI, and it's in there. And what happens when you go to the portal at the DOJ to look at what's behind this redaction? Another redaction. So we can't even see them. And then there's some of these files you've pulled down from the website that we will never see because we can't search the redactions. So I have several questions for you. Who's responsible? Are you able to track who in your organization made this massive failure and released the victims' names? Are you able to track who it was that obscured Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in an FBI document? Do you have that kind of accountability?
I believe Wexner's name was listed more than 4,000 times.
Yeah, I already told you that. This is where he's listed as a co-conspirator.
Can I finish my answer? Come on, let me finish my answer. We corrected that within 40 minutes. He was already, you're acting like everybody's trying to cover up Wexner's name.
Reclaiming my time.
I'm going to answer this question.
Reclaiming my time. Mr. Chairman.
This isn't how this works.
Can I have my time back?
Mr.
Chairman.
The gentlelady can give her answer. The time belongs to the gentleman from Kentucky.
All right, I'm reclaiming my time.
Can I give my answer?
So I'm going to put the language of the bill up on the screen.
Chairman, may I give my answer on that? It's a political joke, and I need to give my answer on that.
We'll let the Attorney General respond, and then the gentleman can move to his next question.
It's my time.
Within 40 minutes, you asked me a question. Within 40 minutes, Wexner's name was added back.
Within 40 minutes of me catching you red-handed.
There was one redaction out of over 4,700, and we invited you in. This guy has Trump derangement syndrome. He needs to get, you're a failed politician. You need to get on to watch the matter.
Mr. Chairman, please restore his time and remind the witness of the rules here.
There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals.
Is that your position as well?
My position is any victim who comes forward, of course, we would love to hear from them. 1-800-CALL-FBI. Did you ask Merrick Garland that the last 4 years? Did you talk about Epstein?
I am reclaiming my time. I'm glad you're asking about Merrick Garland.
You don't get to reclaim time when you don't.
This is bigger than Watergate.
When I don't answer a question the way you want.
This goes over 4 administrations. You don't have to go back to Biden. Let's go back to Obama. Let's go back to George Bush. This cover-up spans decades, and you are responsible for this portion of it.
And that's where the
I want to know at what point did the FBI and the DOJ decide that Lex Wexner was not a co-conspirator? Because our Epstein Files Transparency Act requires you, please put it back on the screen, please, to release the internal decision about whether to prosecute him or not, and it's not in the files, and it's not in the files for any of these other men.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
May she answer?
And he's a hypocrite because he voted against the ban that we were talking about on deep fake AI porn. Only 2 people voted against it, and you were one of them, hypocrite.
The gentleman's time has